Well, I hope you've got your seatbelt on, because this morning's conversation is not one that people lightly have, but we have to talk about it. I'm going to be talking about death this morning. And it's kind of an interesting thing when you talk about death. Maybe from the stage it's okay. But when you're sitting down at work and somebody tells you, oh yeah, I've just been to the doctor, I've got cancer, the last thing you want to say is, are you going to die? That's what you're thinking, but you don't want to say it. And then when people say, yeah, I'm really sick, we don't bring it up, because death is one of those things that we just don't like to talk about. And so this week I was asking myself, why don't we like to talk about death? What's the reason we don't like to talk about it? Is it embarrassing? No. Everybody dies. I mean, if you know somebody who's passed away, let me see your hand up, seriously. So why don't we talk about it? Is it because we're scared? I think that's one of the reasons we don't talk about death, because it scares us. I think also we don't talk about death because it saddens us. I think scared and sad are the two main reasons we don't talk about death. But we have to talk about death. Every one of us, unless, Yeshua comes back first. When Jesus comes, he'll put an end to death. I understand that. But from Adam and Eve to today, everybody dies. We know everybody's going to die. I was just talking to my mom last week. She's not old yet, but she's getting into that stage of life where she's thinking about death. And she says, you know what, I should write a will. I said, yeah, you should write a will. I had mine done 10 years ago. I've got kids. I've got property. I don't want to just die, and what do you do with it? I said, yes, write a will. I said, even if you don't want to give me anything. I didn't say that. My mom doesn't have stuff, which is great, so now I don't have to worry about it. But she's got a house. Who's going to deal with the house? Who's going to deal with all her little collectibles? And it's got to be put in paper. And when you talk about death with somebody, especially if you're a believer and they're not, it gives you an opportunity to say, have you really thought about the afterlife, where you might go? Not too long ago, I got a phone call, and I get these every once in a while. My so-and-so, my relative, is in hospice. They've only got a matter of hours or days left. Will you come please talk to them? I don't always say yes. Have you talked to them? Do they want me to come? That's usually what I ask. No, I'd just like you to show up. No, you ask them if I can come. If they say yes, I'll be happy to be there. But just don't spring me on them. You talk to them. So anyway, she asked for you by name. She asked if you would come. Oh, then I'm happy to go. Now, I've seen this sort of thing several times happen with my own grandma. Got in my car, drove out to California because she only had a few days left. My grandma had already told me time and time again she's not interested in Jesus. But she's going to die. I had to talk to her one more time. Asked everybody to leave the room. I said, Grandma, do you know where you're going to go? I don't care. I don't care. Grandma, it's a very serious thing. Well, I'm going to go where your grandfather went. I want to be with him. We get all these thoughts that run through our head, like that one. How many of you have heard something like that before? Or, I want to go to hell because that's where all my friends will be. You heard that one? That's a nice way of dismissing the subject and making a joke out of it. But I take these things seriously. I don't want anybody going to hell. Oh, but that's where all your friends will be. How do you know that? What if they all change their mind on their deathbed and you're there alone? And you know what? I've got a map to Tucson, and I got a GPS capacity in my cell phone. I can get my way around here. You got a map to hell? How big's the place? You ever been there? What if it's as big as Arizona? And you go there and you're looking for all your friends, and you get dropped out in the middle of the desert. Where's your friend? You think they got cell phones? You're going to ring them up? Cell phones in hell? A map? You think you're going to walk into somebody and say, hey, man, where's George? Where's George, you idiot? We're in hell! So, this is why we don't like to talk about it. Very unpleasant conversation. Where do I go when I die? Do I go to heaven? Do I go to hell? Or is there no such thing? I just disappear. I cease to exist. There was a doctor who believed in the afterlife, but he wanted to see if there was any way of proving that a human has a soul. True story. His name was Dr. McDougall, and he did this experiment in the 1900s. Here's what Dr. McDougall did. He got 6 patients who were terminal, and he told them about his experiment. He said, I would like to tend to you in your dying hours, but I'm going to put you on a special bed. It's a scale. It will weigh you, and I'm going to watch your weight when you die. And I want to see if you lose weight, because maybe the soul leaves the body, and I can prove it through science. And so he got 6 people to agree to the experiment. Now I would have thought, that's stupid. The soul probably weighs like air. You'd never measure the thing. So he got a real sensitive bed. The article I read said 0.2 of an ounce. Now, the way I do math, that's a fifth, isn't it? 0.2, 1/5? I'm not good with math, but I figure, why do you say 0.2? Maybe it's a medical thing. All 6 of them immediately lost weight the instant they died. About 3/4 of an ounce. Now, another doctor writes in, oh, that's because, when they died, maybe, all their bodily fluids escaped. And he said, they're on the bed. They would have landed on the bed. It wouldn't have changed the weight. And all these people wrote in giving explanations, and none of them held water. So to this day, I've never heard anybody give an explanation as to why they lose 3/4 of an ounce immediately upon death. His belief is their spirit left, and their spirit had some substance to it, had some weight to it. Very interesting. A lot of people don't believe in the afterlife. They don't believe in a heaven or hell. They just think they disappear. But how do you know? I mean, how do you know? None of us have ever been there. So we either have to base it on my own opinion, having no experience or knowledge whatsoever. Oh, I don't believe in an afterlife. Well, fine. What's that mean? You don't know. Or you base it on the opinion of somebody with a little experience and knowledge. Jesus said there is an afterlife. Now, who's smarter, him or you? Who might know more? Even if you say, well, I'm not a religious man, fine, but we're talking about Jesus here. Even people who aren't religious respect him, think he might know. So don't be too quick to dismiss the fact that there might be an afterlife. Jesus talked about life after death. He told a story in Luke chapter 16. If you have your Bibles, and there's one in the pew in front of you, you might want to open up. Problem with opening up your Bibles, my translation is different than yours, and you're going to have a hard time following along, so I'll also put it up on the screen for you. But I want you to know where this is. This is Luke chapter 16, verses 19 through 31. And he talks about the afterlife there. Now, some pastors and some Bible scholars and theologians say this is a parable. I don't believe it's a parable, because I looked at every parable I could find in the New Testament, and you know what I discovered? Jesus never gives a name to anybody in any of the parables, but somebody's mentioned by name in this story. So I don't think it's a parable. Besides, if it was a parable, what's the point of the parable? Isn't it the point to talk about exactly what he's talking about, the afterlife? I think so. And then there's this question. Would Jesus use a theologically inaccurate parable to teach a lesson? I don't think so. So I don't believe this is a parable. I think Jesus is talking about a real story here about a rich man and a guy named Lazarus. Luke 16, 19 through 31. Now, this is not the same Lazarus who died and rose again, for those of you who know the New Testament a little bit. Here's the story. There was once a rich man who wore expensive clothes and every day ate the best food. But a poor beggar named Lazarus was brought to the gate of the rich man's house. He would have been happy just to eat the scraps that fell from the rich man's table. His body was covered with sores, and dogs kept coming up to lick him. You understand the situation here? This guy is a pitifully sick, terminally ill wretch. And he's just laying at the gate of a rich man's house, hoping that he might drop a few leftovers on him so he can eat and live. Well, apparently, that didn't happen, because the poor man died, verse 22. And the angels brought him to Abraham. Now, your version might say Abraham's bosom or next to Abraham or something. The Jewish frame of reference, the afterlife, was called going to Abraham. You might also say going to paradise. They said that. Or going to the Garden of Eden. They said that too. But it's the concept of going to the good place when you die, as opposed to the bad place, which they called Gehenna. Gehinnom in Hebrew. They got that from the place where they used to sacrifice the babies outside of Jerusalem. And then they turned it into a garbage dump and a place where they threw dead bodies that was always smoldering and burning and stinking, covered with maggots and worms. So the word picture would let people know the afterlife on one side is paradise, and the afterlife on the other side is as miserable as that garbage dump outside of Jerusalem where they killed the babies. The word picture was very solid.